You choose. Save your arm or pay $80,000, the surgeon said. That sentence still haunts me. The moment I opened my eyes in the ER, I knew something was catastrophically wrong. Not just because of the pain, though the pain was unlike anything I'd ever experienced, but because of the looks on the doctors' faces when they cut away my jacket sleeve. "Mr. Harrison," the trauma surgeon said, and his voice had that careful, measured tone that doctors use right before they destroy your life. "We need to talk about your arm." I tried to lift my head to look, but a nurse gently pushed me back down. "Don't," she said softly. "Not yet." That's when I understood. Whatever had happened in the factory accident 4 hours ago had changed everything. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that the real nightmare wasn't the injury itself. It was the choice they were about to force me to make. My name is Marcus Harrison. I'm 38 years old. And 6 months ago, I learned that in America, the price of keeping your limb isn't just medical, it's financial. And sometimes those two costs are so intertwined that saving your body means destroying your future. This is the story of the 11 words that still wake me up at night, drenched in sweat, staring at the arm I chose to keep. You choose. Save your arm or pay $80,000. But to understand why that choice was impossible, you need to know what led me to that hospital bed in the first place. I'd worked at Morrison Manufacturing for 16 years. Started right out of high school on the assembly line, worked my way up to machine operator, then floor supervisor. It was honest work, good pay, $62,000 a year with benefits, and I was proud of it. My wife Jenny and I had built a decent life. We owned a modest 3-bedroom house in Cedar Rapids, had 2 kids in middle school, and for the first time in our lives, we had actual savings, almost $12,000 in the bank. We weren't rich, but we were stable. And in working-class America, stability feels like wealth. The accident happened on a Tuesday morning, 6:47 a.m. I remember the exact time because I just checked my watch, thinking about how we were ahead of schedule on the production run. The hydraulic press I was operating had been acting up for weeks, sticking, making strange noises, but the maintenance requests kept getting delayed. Budget cuts, they said. We'll get to it, they said. They didn't get to it. When the safety guard failed and my right forearm got caught in the press, the sound was worse than the pain. The crunch of bone, the hiss of hydraulics, the alarm that started screaming. 3 of my coworkers rushed over, manually releasing the press, while someone called 911. I looked down at my arm and saw something that didn't look like a limb anymore. It looked like meat, like something you'd see in a butcher shop, not attached to a human body. "Don't look at it, Marcus," Jimmy Reyes kept saying, holding my other hand while we waited for the ambulance. "Just breathe, man. Just breathe." But I couldn't stop looking, because I kept thinking, that's my arm. That's my right arm. I'm right-handed. How am I going to work? How am I going to provide for my family? I didn't know yet that those would be the least of my worries. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and pain medication that didn't quite work. The paramedics kept saying encouraging things. "You're going to be okay. We're almost there. Stay with us." But I could see concern in their eyes when they looked at my arm. One of them made a phone call I couldn't quite hear, but I caught the words traumatic injury and possible amputation. That's when the fear really started. At St. Luke's Regional Medical Center, they rushed me straight into a trauma bay. Suddenly, there were 8 people around me, cutting off my clothes, starting IVs, taking x-rays, asking questions I couldn't focus on answering. The pain had reached a level where it stopped being pain and became something else. A white noise that filled every corner of my consciousness. Then Dr. Sarah Chan appeared. She was the hand and orthopedic trauma surgeon on call, and she had the kind of face that was built for delivering bad news. Compassionate, but unflinching. "Marcus, I'm Dr. Chen. I need you to focus on what I'm about to tell you because we don't have much time. That got my attention. Through the pain fog, I forced myself to concentrate. Your forearm has sustained what we call a severe crush injury. Multiple compound fractures, extensive soft tissue damage, compromised blood supply, possible nerve damage. We need to get you into surgery immediately, but first, we need to discuss your options. Options? That word should have been a warning. The damage is extensive, she continued, pulling up X-ray images on a screen I could barely focus on. We can attempt a limb salvage procedure, trying to save the arm through multiple surgeries, vascular repair, bone reconstruction, nerve grafting, or we can perform a below-elbow amputation now, which would be cleaner, faster, and frankly, might give you better long-term function with a prosthetic. Save it, I said immediately. Save my arm, please. Dr. Chen nodded, but there was something in her expression I couldn't read. I need to be honest with you about what limb salvage means. We're looking at a minimum of 3 major surgeries over the next 6 months, extensive physical therapy, months of recovery, and even then, there's no guarantee you'll regain significant function. I don't care, I said. It's my arm. Save it. There's one more thing we need to discuss, she said. And suddenly, her compassionate expression shifted to something that looked like discomfort, embarrassment, your insurance. Those 2 words cut through the pain haze like ice water. What about my insurance? A woman in business casual attire stepped forward. I hadn't even noticed her standing there. Mr. Harrison, I'm Claire from Patient Financial Services. I need to inform you that your insurance company, Mid-America Health Plans, is requiring pre-authorization for the limb salvage procedures Dr. Chen described. Pre-authorization? I'm in an emergency room. My arm is... I couldn't even finish the sentence. I understand this is difficult, Claire said, and she genuinely looked upset. But your plan requires authorization for any procedure exceeding $50,000. The limb salvage surgery Dr. Chen is recommending will cost approximately $80,000 for the initial operation alone, not including the follow-up procedures. The number hit me like a second accident. The amputation, Claire continued quietly, would cost approximately $25,000 and is covered under your policy's emergency surgery provisions. No authorization needed. I stared at her, then at Dr. Chen, then at the ceiling. This couldn't be real. This had to be a nightmare I was about to wake up from. Let me make sure I understand, I said, my voice shaking. You're telling me that the cheaper option is cutting off my arm? I'm telling you, Claire said carefully, that the amputation is fully covered. The limb salvage procedure requires authorization, which in emergency cases can take 24 to 48 hours. And even if approved, you'd be responsible for your deductible and coinsurance, which would amount to approximately $16,000 out of pocket. Dr. Chen interrupted. Marcus, I need to tell you something from a medical perspective. We can stabilize your arm temporarily and wait for insurance authorization. But every hour we wait increases the risk of complications, infection, tissue death, the possibility that we'd have to amputate anyway. The golden window for limb salvage in crush injuries is about 6 hours from the time of injury. We're at 4 hours right now. So I have 2 hours to decide whether to keep my arm or to get insurance authorization, Claire added. I've already submitted the emergency request. But what? Jenny's voice came from the doorway. I hadn't even realized she'd arrived. She rushed to my side, her face pale with terror. What's going on? Someone called me and said Marcus was in an accident. She looked at my arm and went even paler. Dr. Chen explained everything again, more gently this time. Jenny listened, gripping my good hand so tightly it hurt. When Dr. Chen finished, Jenny turned to Claire. So, if the insurance approves it, we'd owe $16,000? plus the cost of the 2 follow-up surgeries, which would be subject to the same cost-sharing provisions. We're estimating total out-of-pocket costs between $30,000 and $40,000 for the complete treatment. Jenny's hand went slack. 30,000? We don't have 30,000. We have 12,000 in savings, and that's supposed to be for emergencies and the kids' college fund? She looked at me, and I saw the same trapped expression I felt on my own face. There are payment plans, Claire said, and we can discuss financial assistance programs, though I should mention that your household income is above the threshold for our charity care. So, what are you saying? I asked, and I could hear my voice rising. That we should just let them cut off my arm because we can't afford to keep it? The silence in that trauma bay was deafening. Finally, Dr. Chen spoke. Mr. Harrison, I can't make this decision for you. From a purely medical standpoint, I can attempt the limb salvage, though I need to emphasize that the outcomes are unpredictable. Some patients regain 70–80% function, others regain less than 30%. Some develop chronic pain, infection, or complications that lead to amputation later anyway. And the prosthetic option? Modern below-elbow prosthetics are remarkable. Many amputees achieve excellent function, often better than a badly damaged limb that's been salvaged. There's also less chronic pain, faster recovery, and, she hesitated, and it's cheaper, I finished bitterly. Yes, she admitted, it's cheaper. I looked at Jenny. She was crying silently, and I knew she was doing the same impossible math I was. $30,000 in debt versus losing my arm. Our savings wiped out versus my limb. Our financial future versus my physical future. Can I think about it? I asked. Dr. Chen checked her watch. We're at 4 hours and 20 minutes post-injury. I wouldn't recommend waiting more than another hour. And, Mr. Harrison, I need you to understand something. If you choose limb salvage and the insurance denies authorization, or if you can't afford the costs, you could end up with both: a damaged arm that doesn't work well and crushing medical debt. That's when she said it, the sentence that still echoes in my head every single day. You choose, save your arm or pay $80,000. She didn't mean it cruelly. She was just stating the reality. But the words crystallized everything wrong with the situation. My arm had become a financial calculation. My body had been reduced to a cost-benefit analysis. I looked at Jenny. What do I do? I don't know, she whispered. God, Marcus, I don't know. It's your arm, but it's also our life savings and the kids and the house and time, Dr. Chen said gently. I need to give you time. I'm going to stabilize your arm as best I can and give you 45 minutes to decide. I'll have the surgical team on standby for either procedure. She squeezed my shoulder. I'm sorry this is happening to you. After she left, Jenny and I sat in that trauma bay, holding hands, staring at my mangled arm, doing calculations that no couple should ever have to do. If we borrow against the house, Jenny said slowly, we could maybe get 20,000. That would cover most of the initial surgery. And the follow-up surgeries? The physical therapy? What if I can't go back to work for 6 months? We'd lose the house, Jenny. We'd lose everything. But it's your arm. I know it's my arm, I shouted, and immediately regretted it. I'm sorry. How is this a choice I have to make? How is this even legal? Neither of us had an answer. Jenny pulled out her phone and started frantically researching. There are medical credit companies, care credit, stuff like that. The interest rates are insane, but we'd be paying it off for the next 10 years. I don't care, she said fiercely. It's your arm, Marcus. You need your arm. We'll figure out the money somehow. But even as she said it, I could see the fear in her eyes. We both knew families who'd been destroyed by medical debt. Jenny's cousin had filed for bankruptcy after her husband's cancer treatment. My uncle lost his house after a stroke. These weren't hypotheticals. They were warnings.
"What if I choose to save it and it doesn't work?" I asked. "What if we go into debt and I end up with an arm that doesn't function anyway? Dr. Chen said there's no guarantee." "Then at least we tried," Jenny said, but her voice wasn't convincing. Claire came back in. "Mr. Harrison, I have an update. Your insurance company has responded to the emergency authorization request."
My heart jumped. And they've denied the limb salvage procedure. The room started spinning. They're claiming it's not medically necessary because a below-elbow amputation would provide adequate functional restoration with less risk of complications. However, you do have the right to appeal, and in emergency cases, we can proceed with treatment while the appeal is pending. "But if the appeal fails, we're responsible for the full cost?" Jenny asked. "Yes. The full $80,000 for the initial surgery plus the follow-up procedures." "How long does an appeal take?" "Usually 30 to 60 days. "We don't have 30 days, I said. Dr. Chen said we have less than an hour. "I understand," Claire said. "That's why you can choose to proceed now and appeal afterward. Or," she looked genuinely pained, "or you can accept the covered procedure." Accept the covered procedure. Such sanitized language for let them cut off your arm because it's cheaper. After she left, Jenny and I sat in silence. We'd been married for 14 years. We'd been through tough times, job losses, sick kids, family drama, but nothing like this, nothing that felt this impossible. "I keep thinking about Carly's piano lessons," Jenny said suddenly. "What?" "Carly's been taking piano lessons for 3 years. She's really good, Marcus. She wants to try out for the regional competition next spring. Piano lessons cost $120 a month. If we're $30,000 in debt, we can't afford that anymore. We probably can't afford Riley's football either. We definitely can't afford the family trip to Yellowstone we've been saving for. Jenny, I'm not saying you should lose your arm for piano lessons. I'm trying to understand what this decision means, not just for you, but for all of us." She was right. This wasn't just about my arm. It was about our family's entire future, about whether we could afford the life we've been building, or whether this single moment would reset us back to zero, or worse, into the negative. "What would your dad do?" Jenny asked. "My father had been a coal miner, died of black lung at 59. Worked until the day he couldn't breathe anymore. He was a tough man, practical to a fault. I knew exactly what he'd say. 'It's just an arm, son. You've got another one. Take care of your family.' But my father had also died drowning in medical debt, and that debt had passed to my mother, who spent her last years in a tiny apartment instead of the house they'd owned for 30 years. Dr. Chen came back in. 'Mr. Harrison, we're at 5 hours post-injury. I need your decision.' I looked at Jenny. She was crying again, but she nodded, giving me permission to choose whichever path I thought was right. I looked at my arm. Even under the temporary splint and bandages, I could see how destroyed it was. Could see the unnatural angles, the swelling, the discoloration that meant dying tissue. I thought about my kids. Carly, who wanted to be a pianist. Riley, who dreamed of playing college football. Did I have the right to jeopardize their futures to save a limb that might not even work? I thought about Jenny, who'd stood by me for 14 years through everything. Did I have the right to drown our family in debt because I couldn't accept losing part of myself? I thought about work. Even if they saved my arm, even if I regained 70% function, could I ever operate heavy machinery again? Would Morrison Manufacturing even take me back? Or would I be disabled, unemployed, and in debt? "Marcus," Dr. Chen said gently, "I need an answer." "If you save it," I asked, my voice barely a whisper, "what are the realistic odds it'll be functional? Real odds, not best-case scenario." She looked me straight in the eye. "With this level of damage, maybe 40% chance of regaining useful function, 30% chance of chronic pain syndrome, 20% chance of infection requiring amputation later anyway. Those are real numbers. And the prosthetic? Modern myoelectric prosthetics can restore 60 to 70% of normal function. No chronic pain from a mangled limb, faster return to work. Many amputees report satisfaction with their quality of life. Do it, I said suddenly. The amputation. Marcus, Jenny gasped. Do it, I repeated, and I could hear the defeat in my own voice. Take the arm. I can't put our family through this. I can't risk everything on a 40% chance. Dr. Chen nodded slowly. Are you certain? This is irreversible. I'm certain, I lied. Because I wasn't certain at all. But I was out of time, out of options, and out of choices that made any sense. I'll prep the surgical team, Dr. Chen said. Mr. Harrison, I'm deeply sorry it came to this. After she left, Jenny crawled into the hospital bed beside me, careful of all the IVs and monitors, and just held me while I cried. It's going to be okay, she kept saying. We'll get through this. It's going to be okay. But we both knew it wasn't okay. Nothing about this was okay. They took me into surgery at 7:42 a.m., 8 hours after the accident, 2 hours after I'd been forced to choose between my arm and my family's financial survival. When I woke up in recovery, my first thought wasn't about the phantom limb sensation everyone had warned me about. It wasn't about the pain, which was substantial despite the medication. It wasn't even about the strange lightness of my right side, the absence where my arm should have been. My first thought was, I let them cut off part of my body because I couldn't afford to keep it. That's what haunts me. Not the loss itself, but the reason for the loss. The fact that medical necessity took a back seat to financial calculation. The fact that in the richest country in the world, I had to choose between physical wholeness and economic survival. The recovery was exactly as difficult as they promised. The phantom limb pain was excruciating. My brain kept sending signals to an arm that wasn't there anymore, creating burning and itching sensations I couldn't scratch. The psychological adjustment was even harder. I'd look down and feel shock every single time at the absence, the empty space where my forearm should have been. But here's what nobody tells you about choosing amputation for financial reasons. The guilt doesn't go away. Every time I look at my prosthetic arm, which cost $8,000, even with insurance, by the way, I wonder if I made the right choice. Every time I struggle to do something that used to be automatic, I second-guess myself. What if the limb salvage had worked? What if I'd been in the 40% with good outcomes? What if I'd fought harder with the insurance company, filed appeals, found a lawyer? What if I'd been willing to take on the debt? 3 months after the surgery, I found out something that made everything worse. Morrison Manufacturing's workers' compensation insurance should have covered my medical expenses, but because I'd chosen the non-medically necessary amputation, as my insurance company characterized it, instead of fighting for the limb salvage, workers' comp argued they shouldn't have to pay full benefits. They claimed I'd chosen a more radical procedure than required. The irony was crushing. I'd chosen amputation to avoid debt, and now I was being penalized financially for that choice. We ended up settling with workers' comp for 70% of what we should have received. Morrison Manufacturing, meanwhile, laid me off 3 months later. Restructuring, they called it. But I know the truth. A one-armed former machine operator was a liability they didn't want to deal with. My family did survive, financially speaking. We're not in crushing debt. We didn't lose the house. Carly still takes piano lessons, though we had to cut back on other things. Riley still plays football. But I lost something more than an arm that day in the hospital. I lost my faith in a system that's supposed to protect people. I lost my belief that working hard and playing by the rules guarantees anything. I lost the naive assumption that in America, medical decisions are made by doctors and patients, not by insurance companies and accountants. I also learned something crucial. I'm not alone. After I started talking about my experience, I heard from dozens of other people, hundreds eventually, who'd been forced to make similar impossible choices. The woman who chose to lose her leg instead of risking bankruptcy on a limb salvage that might not work. The man who declined the expensive cancer treatment and opted for palliative care because he didn't want to leave his wife drowning in debt. The parents who had to choose which of their child's 3 necessary surgeries they could afford. These stories are everywhere, hidden in shame and silence, because we've been taught that medical debt is somehow our fault. That if we just had better insurance, or saved more money, or made better choices, we wouldn't be in these situations. But here's the truth nobody wants to admit. The system is designed to force these choices. It's designed to make people like me weigh their bodies against their bank accounts. It's designed to turn medical care into a financial calculation where the answer is often, you can't afford to be whole. Dr. Chen visited me during one of my follow-up appointments for the prosthetic fitting. "How are you doing?" she asked, and I could tell she meant it as more than a medical question. "Honestly, I'm angry," I said. "I'm angry that I had to make that choice. I'm angry that you had to be the one to tell me about it. I'm angry that somewhere in an insurance company office, someone made a decision about my body based on a spreadsheet." She nodded. "For what it's worth, I'm angry too. I became a surgeon to save limbs, not to discuss their cost-benefit analysis, but this is the system we work in now." "Has this happened to other patients?" "More often than you'd think," she admitted. "The number of times I've had to factor insurance coverage into treatment recommendations, it's not why I went to medical school." That conversation stayed with me, because it meant I wasn't crazy for feeling like something was fundamentally wrong. It meant the horror I'd experienced wasn't an aberration, it was standard operating procedure. 6 months after the amputation, I got my myoelectric prosthetic. It's an impressive piece of technology. Sensors pick up electrical signals from my remaining muscles and translate them into movements of the artificial hand. I can grip objects, type, even play catch with Riley, though not as well as before. But every time I strap it on, I remember those 11 words. You choose, save your arm or pay $80,000. I remember the look on Jenny's face when she realized we were choosing my body parts based on their price tags. I remember the shame of admitting I couldn't afford to keep my own limb. I remember the crushing weight of making an irreversible medical decision primarily on money. Sometimes people ask me if I regret my choice. The honest answer is, I don't know. I regret that I had to make a choice at all. I regret that in America, your access to your own body parts depends on your insurance policy and bank account balance. I regret that medical ethics now includes how much can the patient afford as a primary consideration. Would I do it differently if I could go back? Maybe. Probably. I don't know. But here's what I do know. Nobody should ever have to make the decision I made. Nobody should have to choose between physical wholeness and financial survival. Nobody should have to stand in an emergency room doing calculations about whether they can afford to keep their arm. The real nightmare isn't living with one arm. I've adapted. The prosthetic works reasonably well. I found a new job, though it pays less. Life goes on. The real nightmare is knowing that this is how the system is designed to work. That somewhere right now, someone else is lying in a hospital bed being told to choose between their body and their bank account. That medical debt is the leading cause of bankruptcy in America, and stories like mine are considered normal, acceptable, just the cost of health care. My name is Marcus Harrison. I'm 38 years old, and 6 months ago, I let them amputate my arm because I couldn't afford to keep it. That sentence still doesn't feel real, but it is. And until we admit that this is happening, that people are losing parts of themselves, not because medicine can't save them, but because they can't afford to be saved, nothing will change. The surgeon said, "You choose, save your arm or pay $80,000. And that sentence will haunt me for the rest of my life. Not because I made the wrong choice. I'll never know if it was wrong, but because I shouldn't have had to choose at all.